Mr. Saktiandi, Supaat.
Mr. Speaker, sir, looking beyond our shores, we have seen in recent weeks how a sound and sustainable fiscal policy is important to maintain investor confidence in a government and the national economy. As a global centre for investments, we must strive to maintain Singapore's track record of stable governance and a key distinguishing feature, which is far-sighted planning. $3 million or sometimes billion or trillion-dollar question for any elected responsible government is how to balance government expenditure against revenues. There are more and more things that we would like the government to spend on to improve the lives of Singaporeans. But no one likes the ideas of raising taxes to finance that. So this bill, if passed, allows appropriate changes to be done in the run-up to the GST increase. On that note, I turn to this GST bill. Mr. Speaker, the pickup in inflation and the rising cost of living are some of the challenges Singaporeans are facing, especially for the lower and middle-income families caring for the elderly parents and children. In my adjournment motion last month, I spoke about the new normal of higher interest rates and higher costs on our Singaporean households. This is even before the proposed GST increase, and understandably, people are concerned. However, I note the government has been taking steps to address current cost of living even before the GST kicks in. First, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, MAS, made 5 moves to appreciate the Singapore dollar since October last year and mitigated imported inflation. 2 were off-cycle tightening moves in January and July this year. This was done early by MAS and has been effective in reducing the impact of inflation on our import-dependent economy and in some way defended Singaporeans' purchasing power. As DPM Wong explained in July this year, the stronger dollar had helped us keep the increase in food prices to 3%, even though the global increase was 20.3%. The increase in energy prices was 13.6% in Singapore from January to May 2022, whereas the global increase was around 27.5%. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank MAS and the team managing and formulating the Sing dollar policy for their preemptive, calibrated moves much earlier in 2021, before moves by other central banks were made and before all the headline inflation concerns reared its head significantly in 2022. Second, the government has extended substantial assistance for cost of living in the form of support packages, beginning with the 560 million household support package in Budget 2022. It also brought forward some of the measures like the CDC vouchers in April 2022 and rolled out an additional 1.5 billion support package in June 2022 to provide immediate help for low-income and more vulnerable groups. Then, as recently as 2 weeks ago, the government announced an additional 1.5 billion support package to provide further relief for all Singaporean households, including a cost of living special payment of up to $500 cash for 2.5 million adult Singaporeans. I'm sure we can trust this government to further add to that support if the economic situation continues to worsen. Seeing the most recent package with further support packages will be targeted to all Singaporeans rather than just a smaller segment. So that's the question I'd like to ask DPM. If not, will government consider raising the per capita income threshold for definition of lower income households so that a broader base of Singaporeans can benefit? From the Ministry of Finance's technical report dated October 2022, I note that 4 rounds of support measures in 2022 have already helped retirees, and the bottom 40% of Singaporeans cover more than 100% of their projected increase in spending due to inflation. Mr. Speaker, GST was part of the government's plan to raise revenue long before the current inflation and cost of living issues arose. Since it was first announced in 2018, I note the government has been adjusting to economic conditions. It did not proceed with the GST increase in the height of the pandemic years, and it has also taken the decision to stagger the increase over 2 years so that consumers and businesses have time to adjust. In light of the dynamic nature of the economic environment, I would like to ask the Minister for Finance several questions. Some have been asked by other members before, but in light of the changing economic environment now, I want to ask and seek Minister's views again. First, should we delay the increase in view of heightened inflation? That's the first question. Second, whether a GST increase is the right fiscal stance as part of the macro policy mix now, given the risk of inflationary pressures remaining sticky for longer and a weakening global and domestic economy possibly in 2023, and you never know, maybe slightly beyond that. Third, would we proceed if there's a sharp deterioration in conditions? And fourth, can we delay the increase if our fiscal needs are not urgent? If the answer is that we should still proceed with the GST increase, then it must be implemented carefully. We cannot leave the more vulnerable Singaporeans behind. I'm cognizant that not many countries talk so much about GST offsets to mitigate its effects as much as Singapore, I think, and way in advance. And thankful that several announcements previously in the previous budgets to offset the impact of the GST increase. In this regard, and on the basis of the economic environment we are in and the macro outlook we are facing, I hope that the Minister for Finance and DPM, you can assure our lower income households and middle income households, as well, and in particular, our sandwich class segments in Singapore, that they will be buffered against the GST increase, even in this heightened inflationary environment. The GST voucher scheme is one of the ways in which the government helps to buffer the middle and lower income against GST increase. So I would like to seek some clarifications to ensure that the GSTV scheme is able to meet its objective well. Some of my residents have inquired on the GSTV scheme during my recent launch of the Cost of Living Assistance Program, or CLAP, as you call it in Toa Payoh East, a ground-up initiative involving the tripartite partners of the local merchants, residents, and Toa Payoh East CCC CWF. It's aimed to supplement additional help to lower and middle-income families beyond the government's COL transfers or payments and GSTV to cope with their daily expenses and boost the businesses of our heartland merchants and hawkers. So first, has the government conducted regular reviews to assess the need to raise the per capita income threshold such that more households can qualify for permanent GSTV vouchers? Second, the annual value of home is a key factor in the eligibility criteria of aid programs such as GSTV and CHAS schemes. Has the recent boom in the property market led to any significant increases in the annual value of homes to the extent of affecting the occupiers' eligibility of schemes like the GSTV? In terms of administration, how many of those eligible have yet to sign up for the GSTV vouchers? And what are the avenues available to those who are less digitally inclined and unfamiliar with checking their eligibility through the e-service? How many of those eligible last year were sent checks that they did not encash? In addition, what are the cost drivers of the administrative expenses under the Goods and Services Tax Voucher Fund, which for financial year 2021 and 2022 amounted to $10.7 million? This was $200,000 more than the previous financial year. So could the ministry also share what measures have been taken to minimize such expenses over the years? Will the new GovCash initiative be implemented this year reduce such processing expenditure? Mr. Speaker, the good thing also about raising GST is that it catches everyone, even tourists, who just stop by Singapore for one day or 1 week. This is not the same for personal income tax or property taxes, which will definitely hit Singaporeans, but not necessarily our foreigner friends. With our recovering tourism numbers post-COVID-19, it makes the GST increase an even more attractive revenue option. How much additional revenue are we expecting to raise from the GST increase, and how much of that are expected to come from foreigners like tourists? And what is the projected level of tourism recovery compared to pre-pandemic levels as of today, 1st January 2023 and 1st January 2024, both in tourist numbers and the economic value that it would be generated as a result? Mr. Speaker, on this note, on the new sections of 39 to 39F in the bill on the treatment of services provided and or payments received across periods of different tax rates, another issue, has the government prepared easy-to-understand guides for small merchants, for example? If not, may I ask if the government will do so? Speaking for myself, I did take a while to understand the various illustrations provided in the explanatory statement to the bill. While the amendments are unlikely to impact our neighbourhood store owners who typically provide one-off goods and services, Such guides would help some of our local SMEs who might not fully grasp the options available to them. I also remain concerned about businesses taking the opportunity to increase their prices at a rate that goes beyond passing on their costs to their consumers. Taking an example we are all familiar with, the price of cooked food at our hawker centres and coffee shops are usually hiked at 50 cents to $1 at a time, which is a substantial percentage increase where their base prices are around, on average, $4 today. Any unjustified increases might not be high enough to pass the threshold to be reported to the Committee Against Profiteering. And even if they do, the average consumer is hardly going to report the economy rise or nasi padang stall for a higher price than they expected. So I would like to invite the Ministry or the Committee Against Profiteering to devise a systematic way to analyze cost increases on the ground, especially repeated increases in a short period of time. On the new measures in the bill to address missing trader fraud, can the Ministry also clarify what is the difference between the new Section 62C and the existing regime? I understand that this is to catch a situation where a seller collects output GST on goods sold but disappears without paying it to IRAS. In the meantime, other parties in the supply chain continue to deduct input GST claims on purchases they have made. The products are then exported by the last seller in the chain, who also does not need to pay GST to IRAS since export sales are zero-rated. However, I understand that it is already a chargeable offence. 6 men were charged in 2021 in connection with the Nagor trading. So are the amendments only to include enhanced maximum penalties of a $500,000 fine and or 10 years imprisonment? If so, will the sentencing precedents under the existing regime still be applicable to guide the appropriate sentences under this new enhanced framework? Mr. Speaker, sir, notwithstanding the clarification sought, I support the bill.